And welcome once again to another episode of the Horizon Roundtable. I am Bob McDonald, and you can find me on Twitter at Bob McDonald. Jimmy Lemke, who you can find on Twitter at PantherU, is a bit under the weather today. Actually, I feel kind of bad. I think I might have spread my disease from last week to him over our last recording session. So get well soon, Jimmy. But filling in with him is Jim Sarro.
Hey Bob, thanks for having me. And I wanted to let you know, for those on the Twitter world, I am awake and I am not stoned based on last week's podcast.
Yeah, I didn't realize I had woken up Jimmy last week, so that's my bad to Jimmy on that one as well. So I'm sorry for transmitting my disease through the internet and also waking you up last week. So yes. So Jim, yeah, I really appreciate you filling in for Jimmy this week. Which this weekend at Jim Sarrow, SAROW, is your people can follow you there.
That's correct. Yep. And this week is probably tailor-made for me. We got a lot of good stuff that's in my wheelhouse.
You are absolutely correct. Today is we are going to talk about a lot of stuff. We are now halfway through the conference schedule, so we're gonna touch upon the ins and outs and the ups and downs of that. But we are going to start this week with an announcement, not from us, obviously. But we're going to start with the Horizon League making an announcement. Apparently they didn't want to wait until the absolute last minute to let us know where the conference tournament was going to be after they left Detroit this year, after they left Little Caesars Arena, and see if we can guess where they ended up. Oh, wait, we already did. In September, it's going to Indianapolis. So this is going to Farmers Insurance Arena in Indianapolis. So essentially, I don't know how much Jim, I don't know how much they pay those consultants they wanted to bring in, but they should scratch a check to me instead, because I literally said the same thing in our in episode 34. And in fact, I'm pretty sure we tweeted it out on the Horizon Roundtable Twitter accounts at Horizon RT, I believe, and I'm pretty sure episode 34, where we talked about the end of Motor City Madness. I, at the 33-minute mark, said we know where this is going, and it went exactly as it went.
For certain, you nailed that, and I'm guessing you're probably not even giving yourself enough credit, Bob, because go back to June of 2016, I believe, when IUPUI was announced that they were joining the league, or was that, June of 17?
Yes.
I'm guessing you probably said it then, too, and just don't remember saying it. Like, this has been...
I don't have it recorded saying that. I probably don't, because the podcast hasn't been back that long.
Got it.
But that may be very accurate, and as I understand it correctly, many people have been hoping... let's be honest, okay? A lot of Horizon League fans, including those who are no longer with us, sorry Valpo fans, when the whole idea of a centralized neutral site, quote-unquote neutral site, for a Horizon League tournament, when this whole idea came to the fore, we were all we thought, really, because the Horizon League is based in Indianapolis, because Indianapolis is probably the most central location to all of the Horizon League schools, Green Bay notwithstanding. Because of that, it was a lot of, and this was this is probably about in 2015 that we were saying this, that Indianapolis made much more sense as the location for the tournament than did Detroit, and it also kind of, at that point in time, since there was no school in Indianapolis at that point in time, it also kind of bolstered that idea of neutrality. But that didn't happen,
Bob,
obviously.
I would say you are nailing it right here, because the idea of Indianapolis, I don't think anybody that's a fan of the league is against Indianapolis and the venue at 6,800 seats and recently remodeled with like a $50 or $60 million renovation in the last 5 years is actually probably really good for a neutral site tournament. It's the idea, though, that it's IUPUI's freaking home, and they have done nothing to deserve hosting the semifinals and finals of this tournament. And you can tell me about a neutral court, paint, and all this other stuff. It's their home gym, for God's sake.
And I'm glad you brought that up. So fast forward 2 years after they made the announcement that after announcing Motor City Madness, fast forward 2 years, Valpo leaves, IUPUI comes in, now this whole idea of a neutral court kind of goes out the window, and then the next year, of course, as we all kind of predicted, Motor City Madness was announced that it was going to no longer be Motor City Madness. It was going to go away. I mean, and that made sense too, obviously, as I saw it, it was, and I mentioned this in September as well, the city, the Olympia Entertainment, who were the people who were running Motor City Madness, they their whole goal was this to be, from an organizational standpoint, not necessarily an attendance, from an organizational standpoint, to show other entities that they could organize and put together a tournament format successfully, which I think we can all objectively agree Olympia Entertainment did their job in terms of putting together the tournament. Not necessarily the draw, but the actual putting together and organizing and running the tournament from an organizational standpoint.
Olympia did from a facility standpoint, and I went to 2 of the 3, as I've mentioned on the Battle Royale.
Yeah.
They did a great job as a host venue. It was first class all the way. They were giving from the league multiple different formats that I don't think we're actually ever going to successfully bring fans to Detroit. Aside from the perception people have of Detroit, but still way the tournament down, playing all the way to Tuesday. Like was never going to be successful in that building with that format. But they did a great job with it, and so they should commend and thank them in the 2 years that we had playing Little Caesars as like maybe the pinnacle of this tournament from facilities and tournament hosting standpoint.
And that's their whole point. And they nailed it. When they off and NBA for using for a hot tournament, or they can just use the foundation to bring in bring in the 10 tournament. Not necessarily all of them, just one, because obviously Big Ten tournaments all over the place, various places. But yeah, that was their point, and they did, and they made their point.
Well, maybe now the Indiana Farmers Coliseum can be a gateway to hosting the ECHL Hockey All-Star Game or the Indiana State High School Girls Championship Tournament. Maybe now they've got the gateway to that because they've got the Horizon League to use and as a way to show they can put on a first-class tournament too.
Now, yeah, I mean, and again, not to say that Indianapolis isn't from a locational standpoint, from a city standpoint, from a geographical standpoint. Not to say that Indianapolis, from a geographical standpoint, isn't an ideal spot for this tournament, because I think we can all agree that that this is a good spot. This is where it should have been in the first place. The question now becomes, and I'm glad this is kind of the primary reason why I'm glad we have you on today, because during the Fall Fan Forum, you were the one who actually brought up that, because I didn't even see this when they put out the release about this whole entire search thing. You were the one who actually pointed out the fact that in that release, they mentioned specifically, the Horizon League did, that the venue may not be a primary home arena of a Horizon League school. You were the one who actually pointed that out. And
that information is absolutely in their press release for their RFP that they had.
It is.
You can still find it today on the website if you look hard enough for it. I think what this really goes to show is that either they were, the words primary home venue means something different to you and me than it does to the Horizon League office, or it could show that the other bidding venues really weren't up to par as to what it could be in Indianapolis, and they decided that it was worth it to go over their own word. I do have a little insight that I was told that there was some polling that went out to some of the student athletes, and they were in favor of playing in Indianapolis. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but
I would think and honestly, again, from a geographical standpoint, I think we're all on the same page. Be it fans, be it student athletes, that location in Indianapolis, from a geographical standpoint, is probably the most ideal one for the Horizon League schools in general. So that would make sense that the players would be on board with that as well. And I'm not, so that makes perfect sense to me. Again, it's the big thing though is that
it's IUPUI's gym, for God's sake. It's like, how can you give the newest
I have
program?
many questions about that. I mean, I have so many questions about that. I mean, not from an organizational standpoint, because obviously the IUPUI itself does not run the gym. Obviously, it's an off-campus facility, and it's actually run by the Indiana State Fair, because it's on the Indiana State Fairgrounds. So that's their entity that manages that facility, which also manages, I believe, they have a minor league hockey team in that arena as well. So and various other concerts and events that the state fair, the state fairgrounds, that management company runs. So I don't doubt that the management company itself, who obviously has some experience in putting together events of large and small, I don't doubt that they have the ability to organize but to your point, it still comes down to the fact that it's still IUPUI's home court. Now, which brings me to another question. This is the other, and that confuses me a little, because you can't then have the follow-up question of is IUPUI going to move back to on campus? That doesn't make any sense.
I would say absolutely not. They're going to move back on campus. They're actually starting starting to draw a handful of games over the 1,200 person capacity of the jungle, for sure, you're not going to limit your program and give yourself no upside growth by going back to a high school gymnasium for your men's basketball team.
Exactly.
So no, that's not happening.
So when you look at that, and I'm glad you brought that up and they just renovated Farmers Insurance Arena,
and they need content. When you put that kind of money into a building, you need content. So they're going to want those extra 15 games.
So there is no way on the planet that they were going to cut their nose off to spite their face. They're not going to do that. So yeah, so that leads us to the next question is okay, because obviously the conference had a kind of phone conference announcing this move on last week. I mean, basically it was just pretty much it was your regular run of the mill self-congratulatory, we're so awesome type of thing, even though, let's face it, you probably spent money that you didn't even need to, because let's face it, you could have just did this in the first place without spending any money. Hello. or you could have just paid me $25 for the 5 minutes I just said it in September. I should invoice that too, by the way.
Or apparently they could just call ESPN and say, hey, where do you want the tournament? Because at the end of the day, the other big fail in all of this that we haven't gotten to is the format of the tournament really still isn't improved enough that it's going to be successful. Now you're going to play a semifinal and final on a Monday and Tuesday night in a city where it's close, but people are going to have to make a short notice decision to drive to the games. I'm not sure that the Horizon League fan is going to say, oh, I'm going to pop over to Indianapolis. If you're in Milwaukee, a 4-hour drive. If you're in Cleveland, a 5-hour drive. I'm not sure they're just going to pick up and go there on the off chance their team makes it to the semifinals or finals. And apparently this is all ESPN dictating that.
That's an excellent and again, that is the other thing, and that is the other question that I have that didn't get answered. That was a question that was asked on the call regarding the conference tournament format. That the question was, will the conference tournament format change? And I'll be honest with you, I think truthfully, the primary issue was the fact that they couldn't get and we argued about Jimmy and I discussed this previously, that the format changed, we felt, because the Horizon League couldn't get the dates at Little Caesars Arena, so they could only get 2 days, and then they decided to blow up their entire format. So the question now becomes, do they change that format back and they stop doing this? They don't do this top 8 teams nonsense next year, and I don't think they do. I truthfully think, because they're playing at Farmers Insurance Arena, because they're playing in that facility, they have much more leeway to set specific dates, so that instead of this truncated 2-day thing that they're doing at Little Caesars Arena, which incidentally isn't going to get that many, it's going to be limited to the 4 teams in the Horizon League as opposed to all the teams in the Horizon League. They go back to a format that will allow fans from every single Horizon League school to participate, as it should have been, as what they did with Little Caesars, as they did with in the original history of Little Caesars Arena, which obviously they didn't do this time.
I think a couple things there. I don't think the format's going back to the all 10 teams, or even all 8 of the 8 teams that make it. I say that for 2 reasons. One, in the press release on Friday regarding the move to Indianapolis, they had the dates listed in there. It said dates to be listed, and at the bottom it had the dates of Monday and Tuesday for 2020, 2021, and 2022. So it's already out there what they have. And also, I don't know a lot about the legalities of these things, but if you're booking a venue, wouldn't you have it in contract what days you need the venue today? So it feels like they only have a plan to keep this 4-team thing going, because you don't know that the venue itself isn't going to book out hockey or another concert on the Saturday or Sunday that you need the arena. It feels to me like you would lock that stuff all in on the front end and say, okay, we're doing 3 years, we need these dates, and this is what we're rolling with. But I think that's a huge fail, because we haven't tested this format yet, so now you're committing to it before you've even tested it. This is the first year, this year in 2019, that they're using it, so why lock into it for 3 more years until you know that it's going to work or be successful? So I'm just up in arms over the format and over the IUPI home gym factor. Otherwise I would say huge win to go to Indianapolis, but they just kind of missed the boat on how to really execute this thing, in my opinion.
That is kind of bizarre. The whole thing is kind of bizarre to me, and this is not. I'm not I'm. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and not complain about it, given the fact that my team is probably going to be one of the 9 or 10 teams that doesn't even make it to the tournament this year. I'm still holding to that, because whoop-de-doo, you beat Youngstown State, you still only won 1 game in 9 halfway through. So but it just appears, to me at least, it seems like a very kind of stunted thing where, okay, you're only going to have 8 teams. You pretty much, and the other part of this is that you have, to me at least, really kind of drove home the fact that for all the talk of anything from expansion of the league to more to more schools, this pretty much tells me that you're good with 10 teams, you're good with this format, that's it, and that's it. I mean,
well, this tells me that they need to find every possible D1 team within a 2-hour radius that was willing to move to the Horizon League and get them in the league so they have a chance to make this successful. Like, go grab Fort Wayne, go grab whoever, and get them in the league. So if we're going to 12, you've got teams that can actually get to this tournament with their fans, because otherwise I think it's going to be another albatross. It's just going to be a smaller venue of empty seats that might look slightly better on TV for those who care about that kind of thing.
Well, to be fair, honestly, I mean, that's, because of the size of the arena, I mean, it's going to be, I mean, in all honesty, it's I mean, again, from a venue standpoint, it is ideal. It's way smaller than Little Caesars Arena. It's centrally located. I mean, again, if it wasn't because of the format that apparently seems to be going on, unless they magically change their mind, they have that, which obviously they're well within their rights to do, but there's a lot of, and the other question that I have as well, who they mentioned on the call that they picked Indianapolis out of 3 finalists. Jim, I understand you had a speculation who the other 2 finalists were.
Yeah, I think I had on Twitter that it was the jungle on IUPUI's campus, and then it was the blacktop basketball courts on IUPUI's campus. So it seemed like there was no way they weren't going to this Indianapolis format.
Yeah.
This is, I have 2 things that are kind of also sticking with me on this news. Number 1, I think I counted on the Horizon League Twitter feed. They had 12 retweets that they liked or about this. 8 of them were for people from Indianapolis.
Yeah.
1 was from Scott Nagy. 1 was from the Green Bay Press Gazette, and I can't remember who the other 2 were from. And yet I saw hundreds. Yeah, I was going to say, and I saw hundreds of negative comments on the internet. Like, there's really not a pulse for what the fans wanted here. And then the other thing. Oh, go ahead, Bob.
That's the thing. There never is. I mean, I understand. For years, I have understood kind of the focus of the league. It has always been about. It is, and understandably, though, I get it. It is about the student athletes. Period. All right. That is what it is, and that's fine. That's great. I mean, you are to this conference's credit, they are very focused, highly focused on the experience of the student athlete. I totally get that.
Well, this format, actually, I kind of disagree with that being in line then, because I think of Green Bay right now kind of sitting in that 6 or 7 range in the standings. Mm-hmm. They're likely, if things ended today, they'd either need to go to Cincinnati area to play, either Dayton or Cincinnati to play, or they'd go to Detroit to play. So that would be the first round. And then if they won, they'd come home to Green Bay and then go back out to Indianapolis to play the next couple rounds. You're telling me that's better than just sending everybody to Indianapolis at one time and playing for 4 days and getting it over with? I mean, you can't tell me this has a student athlete in mind with this ridiculous format that they're using.
Oh, incidentally, I'd like to point out one additional thing with regards to this whole question about the Farmers Insurance Coliseum and this whole issue with this whole primary venue issue. I think I figured out where they did the end around here, because as you know, the tournament is, of course, this venue is going to host both the men's and the women's tournament. The IUPUI women do not play at Farmers Insurance Arena. They play in the jungle still.
That is
welcome to the end around.
I would say that's the weakest loophole I've ever.
Yes, it is.
One other thing I want before we get on to other topics, maybe,
yes.
But one other. It kind of feels like a big middle finger to Little Caesars Arena and Olympia. Why are you announcing your 2020 tournament host before you even play your 2019 tournament? Like, why wouldn't you focus all that attention and effort on getting people to actually go to your tournament this year, as opposed to releasing this for next year? Like, you couldn't have done this in April?
Well, no. Well, I mean, timing has never been the Horizon League's strong suit, especially in the last couple of years. I honestly would have thought that they would have made this announcement sometime when everybody was there, like in March, to your point, that they announced it at the end of January when teams were still playing. I don't know. I mean, the whole thing has been kind of a mystery. I mean, we will probably never know who the other 2 finalists were in this whole thing. We probably won't know a lot of different things, and I'm not really in and again, I'm not, as I mentioned, I'm kind of not in a position to be, as the fan of a team that's in the bottom 2, I guess I'm kind of not in a position to be terribly picky at this point in time. But the timing, the location, there are a lot of different questions here. And also, as I mentioned, the whole fan experience with the league has been kind of strained for a long time. It has been. They can deny it all they want, but the Horizon League fans have, for years and years and years, have probably had the same gripes and the same complaints as you and I have had over the years. And they've and to your point, I think it has, to my experience, fallen on deaf ears. I don't know why it has, but as much as you want to attempt to tout student athlete, which again, noble cause, student athletes would also like to play in venues where people actually are there to see them. This is a very important. You can talk about the student athlete experience all you want, and again, to your credit, do what you can do. But your basketball players are definitely very I'm sure a lot of them aren't big fans of playing in empty arenas, which is. But that's a whole other topic for a whole other day. So with that said, like I said, we are halfway through the conference schedule. As we mentioned last week, and it really hasn't exactly changed from the last week. Northern Kentucky still remains at the top of the heap.
Well, as I say, look, to nobody's surprise, if you look at the preseason standings, everybody had Northern Kentucky and Wright State in some format, and here we are, 9 games into an 18-game slate, and they're 1-2. NKU with a 2-game lead. Yep. In the standings. A little bit of surprise for Oakland, although for our friend Matt, not a surprise. He was all over that, to his credit.
True. Very true.
Detroit's an interesting case because when you think you have something and you think you know something, then all of a sudden they go on the road. They lose 2 games, obviously one without Antoine Davis, which was crippling for them.
A little bit, yeah. A lot of it, actually.
A lot of it. And, you look at IUPUI coming with 2 wins this week to get to 5-4. And so the standings really are kind of starting to shake out the way that people, were thinking. The only exceptions, maybe Detroit higher up than where they were thought to be, and UIC lower than where they were thought to be. But it's so close in that middle ground, 5-4, 4-5.
And Cleveland State at the absolute bottom, which I don't think. Honestly, I didn't think. Argue what you want. Nobody thought Cleveland State was going to be as bad as they are this year.
No,
seriously,
I definitely thought they'd be better. But for the next 9 games, the pregame song can be started at the bottom. Now we're here, so they can play that. They can play that during Hoopy Hour.
They could play that in their empty-ass arena where nobody wants to go because nobody gives a shit anymore, including their athletic director who quit. Yeah, so welcome to my world, and I was hoping not to have to talk about that. So, but I do, however, and this one's kind of a surprise to me. It's also why I'm glad I got you on today. Green Bay kind of started out like gangbusters. They were 3-0 in the conference. They were sitting at the top, and then somewhere along the lines, the bottom kind of fell out. They lost 5 of the last 6. So I'm a little confused about that one.
Well, the defense has gone MIA for Green Bay. I mean, this week alone, if you look at the games that they gave 87 to Northern Kentucky, and Drew McDonald barely played because of an ankle injury.
And he still got 30 points.
Yeah, no kidding.
He had a hobbled ankle and he had 30 points. He's definitely boosting his resume for Player of the Year. So
I think he hit a 3 from the bench with an ankle boot on at one point, but I might have been watching a different game. And then they had, but in his stead, Chris Vogt probably had his best game of his career against Green Bay. Yeah. And then Green Bay follows that up, goes to Wright State, who was coming off of a 56-54 win, and they end up losing 87-75. So Green Bay plays 2 games this week, gives up 87 points. Yes, they play fast. There's a tempo and adjustment that has to go for that. But at the end of the day, they're just flat out getting outscored. They're getting tons of penetration to the hoop, lots of miscommunications. It's they've got to work out their defensive end because for the most part their offense has been pretty consistent. They're going to score 7-something points, but they're not stopping anybody right now. And they're also getting just mercifully killed on the glass. They have no inside presence at all. They're playing a lot of 6'6" guys, and even in the Horizon League, you've got 6'6" guys that can jump. There's a bunch of 6'8" guys who are full of muscle and beef, and we're not getting those boards. We're certainly not getting a lot of contested rebounds, it feels like. And the talent is there, but just bringing it all together and making it click. The good news for Green Bay, they've got all the home slate coming forward here. They've got NKU, Wright State, Detroit, Oakland, all at home. So maybe they can kind of sneak back into this thing and get in that top 4 and host a first round game. But right now, defense and rebounding might as well be on a milk carton because it's missing in action.
Yeah, so I think the second half adjustments are going to be very important for Green Bay. And to your point, of course, it's going to be a favorable. And to your point, it's going to be a favorable schedule because obviously, starting right off with Friday. Friday, you got the home game against Milwaukee. So you already start off with kind of the advantage as well. And then the next weekend, you go over to Cleveland State, Youngstown State. Now, naturally, of course, those are the road games, but and of course, as we know, Green Bay almost didn't. Green Bay, if not for a Sandy Cohen buzzer beater, are losing to Cleveland State that game, and obviously I'm not as miserable as I am now. But that looks like kind of a favorable for Cleveland State, for Green Bay at least. That looks like a pretty favorable. It is a road trip, but it looks like a favorable road trip for Green Bay.
They definitely have an opportunity with the way it's set up because their other road game is IUPUI and UIC. Now they've never beaten IUPUI in Horizon League play, and UIC is hit or miss in terms of how consistent they are. But it does set up well for Green Bay. But then the flip side of that for Green Bay is 8 of the 9 games that they played in conference play, even though they're 4-5, they were down 10 points or more in 8 of the 9 games. So they've got some. Even the games they won, they were down 10 points. So they definitely have some things they have to iron out here.
That is true. The one benefit that they do have, obviously, and we've mentioned this multiple times over the course of the season, is that that Green Bay does benefit from the fact that they do have a variety of offensive weapons. Obvious, Sandy Cohen.
About secondary, as I say, secondary scorers from last week. You have Jaquan McLeod, you have Cam Hankerson, you have other guys that can put the ball in the basket besides Sandy Cohen.
Exactly.
The offense, I never worry about them scoring enough points to win. I only worry about them not giving up enough or not giving up so many points. And right now they're in a funk on that end of the court.
Yeah. So so you run, obviously, with Green Bay, the issue is going to be if you run into a situation where you're going to have, it's going to be hit or miss. But again, it's got to be something that's got to get addressed, obviously, because this is the Phoenix are in a funk right now, and because we're talking about the Phoenix, I will spell funk with PH, by the way. So if the Phoenix are in a funk, may have that as, but yeah, so they got to really think about not getting. They really have. I think for Green Bay, it's going to be that Milwaukee game is probably going to be or should be that adjustment game where they kind of figure out some of the things they weren't able to figure out near the tail end of in the last 6 games.
Well, and that game's going to be played on campus in their 4,000 seat arena, so there hopefully is going to be 3,000 or more people there, but 3,000 people in a small gym. I mean, it's like the Oakland atmosphere.
Yeah.
Hopefully that helps be a catalyst, and that having a bigger crowd and a louder crowd doesn't actually spook them, so to speak. Like that they actually feed off of that, as opposed to the other way around, feeling like they're going to play more pins and needles because there's people watching the game. So it can go either way, but I'm definitely looking forward to that game and hopefully getting to 5-5 as a springboard to a good road trip for them.
One of the good, as bad as the last 6 games have been on the in terms of wins and losses has been for Green Bay. The good news is the fact that there's such a logjam between 2nd and 8th place. And so there is the opportunity to kind of, because of how kind of the middle of the pack has been playing, there's at least the opportunity for, if somebody missteps, for Green Bay to kind of jump in, or anybody for that matter, to jump in and be able to, take one of those top four seeds and host a tournament game.
I know, like the Antoine Davis injury is listed as not severe.
Yeah.
But look at the difference. They're 5-4 right in that log jam for Detroit.
Yeah.
Look at the difference between how they were playing with him and then, they play without him against IUPUI and lose by 15 points. So to me, that injury is really significant. Also for you, Bob, that should hopefully make you feel a little bit better. I mean, look how their team was not nearly as good without him. So I think Jimmy was the one that pointed it out. You're kind of saying, look at how fast Detroit has built up their team. Well, look how fast their team wasn't going anywhere when they're missing, their main players. So could give you a little optimism at Cleveland State.
I would love to have that optimism, but I have this very weird feeling. I always have this generally weird feeling that I don't do optimism. When it comes to Cleveland State, I don't do optimism. I just do brutal, absolute reality, and we are in the winter of our discontent at this point, which is funny because it seems like we've been in this it's like Game of Thrones. When winter is here for years. We're on year 4.
Hey, good news for you. If your whole thing has been why wait till February to have to watch them play, well, February is 4 or 5 days away, so hopefully there's a little uptick for you in Cleveland State. But when you look at the standings, the way I see things right now, obviously Northern Kentucky and Wright State are looking pretty much like they're going to be 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Youngstown and Cleveland State are looking pretty much like they're going to be 9 and 10. But that middle ground, like to get that home game, 3 and 4 is wide open, and there's 6 teams sitting there
absolutely
vying for that home game. So it's going to be a lot to watch down the stretch.
Yeah, and I think that I think we mentioned that last week a little bit, is that there's really that middle group, that 3 through 8, and Wright State is 6-3 now, and obviously they've had their own issues this season. Well, so I would actually venture to put them into that group as well, just based on the way their season has gone. Which I would be apt to see kind of how these 2 through 8 teams kind of play it out. I mean, Northern Kentucky, they're already 2 games up already. Do they have is there a chance that they might not be able to perform? Is there a possibility that something horribly could go wrong? Sure. Is it going to happen? I doubt it. I do think, and as they're probably not going to run. I do not suspect they're going to run the table for the last 9 games of the season, but I do think they're really, really well positioned to be at the top of the standings before the tournament. I think their big thing right now is their mission is to win the conference, win the regular season, use that as a springboard to win the conference tournament, and erase the shattered dreams and the horrible memories of Cleveland State beating them last year.
Yeah, I think for Northern Kentucky, if I remember correctly, they play at Wright State. There's an opportunity for a loss. That's going to be a big crowd. But they already played Oakland and Detroit in Detroit, so they're going to get those games at home. They're going to play at Green Bay and at Milwaukee, but those teams are kind of scuffling. So I think maybe one loss. I could see 16-2 for NKU and probably a 3 or 4 game lead when it's all said and done.
Sure.
And I was wrong. I'll be the first to admit I was wrong. Coming into the season, I didn't think they were as good as they'd been in the past, but they definitely are every bit of the preseason hype is justified for them.
Yeah, I do see it as well. And maybe it's because we've all been so focused on just Drew McDonald and not kind of looking at the rest of the parts, because the rest of the parts are doing pretty damn good too right now. I mean,
the rest of the parts are definitely doing good,
yeah.
And that's actually one of my things for Wright State, why I'm a little more sold. Like I was watching the game last night against Green Bay, and they had Skylar Potter and Malachi Smith, who are freshmen, who came in and made meaningful impacts for their team. Like I see their team improving versus not what they started out as.
That's true.
Whereas I see some of the other teams not having meaningful improvement from some of their players, like that organic growth. Like I see Oakland with Trey Maddox. There's a guy who's getting better every time I get a chance to watch him. So
absolutely.
So I see some of the teams actually progressing, and a couple of teams, are definitely kind of stuck in the mud right now. UIC, Green Bay, Milwaukee, kind of definitely spinning their wheels. Every time they take a step forward, they take another one back. So.
But to be fair, obviously Milwaukee was a shot of Milwaukee did only lose to Wright State by 2. So I mean, I don't think Milwaukee's is as stuck in the mud as the other ones you mentioned. But yeah, there's going to be some soul searching on their ends a little bit. So that's definitely something to take a look at. Definitely something to consider.
They can start finding their soul on February 2nd. That's the Saturday morning after they hopefully lose in the Crescent Center in Green Bay.
There you go. So, and with that, we're going to go ahead and close out the podcast. Jim, once again, thank you very much for filling in. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
Sure, no problem. Jimmy, we know you're listening. Get well soon, sir. And of course, you can find episodes of the Horizon Roundtable on sportshacks.com, hax.com, and you can find episodes on wherever you can find podcasts. We're everywhere: iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio.
And Bob, I assume Horizon Link's going to give you a retweet on that when you send the link out, right?
Sure, Jan. That's not going to happen. All right, well, so that is it, and thanks for listening.